Sure. My name is Emily Pilloton, and I'm the founder and executive director of Project H Design. I started Project H in 2008 as a nonprofit, and my background is in architecture and design, so I wanted to start an organization where I could bring some of the creativity and hands-on learning that I learned as an architect into the field of education and get to work with young people on really fun and hands-on real-world projects. In the past 10 years, we've grown as an organization in a lot of different ways. I think when we first got started, we were really focused on small projects and trying to think about how to do sort of intimate building projects with students. And I think as we've grown up, we've thought a lot more deeply about the implications of this type of learning at a larger scale. So what does it mean if an entire school district were to transform their practice towards more creativity? What would it mean if our classrooms were truly diverse and inclusive and filled with awesome tools? So we've worked with a number of schools and partners to try to help scale that type of thinking. We continue to do work with students every single day. I think we think about it beyond just that one project, like what conversations can that foster in a larger educational community? I think so many students don't thrive in a traditional classroom where they're being lectured by a teacher. I was one of those students that I could learn in that scenario, but I always felt like there was something beyond that. And so I think that the benefits for many students is that it allows them to apply core subject learning like algebra, like geometry, like reading skills and social studies through something real. And that is really what cements the learning in your brain beyond just memorization. And so I think when students are able to apply that, and also to do that, to apply it in a context that has consequence and impact in their community, not only does that make learning real, but it means that years from now they can point to that thing and say, I did that, I made that, and that's evidence of their learning. Yeah, I think there's definitely the heart and soul of the type of work that I do is about honoring the brilliance of children and doing work that is meaningful in the world. And so I think that applies to all ages and to all cultures. I think that applies to us as educators and grown-ups, that we have to be engaged in work that we believe in. And that sounds like an oversimplification, but that's something that we often lose sight of once we're entrenched in this system of education. Yeah, I guess I think that even for subjects that are not naturally about physical making, things like philosophy or social sciences, I think there is a mindset where maybe you're not making a physical thing, but you are taking that learning and making it real. So maybe that means you're working in a community rather than only doing research by yourself. I think it's a mindset about expansion. Like, how do you expand the thing you're learning into new fields, into new areas, into new communities? Sometimes that manifests as making, and sometimes it doesn't. But I think it does come with this mindset of being willing to push the boundaries of your own learning. Yeah, that's a great question. So many of the teacher certification and accreditation programs, at least in the US, as far as I know, do not explicitly teach creativity. They don't teach you how to be a creative educator, and I think that's a huge missed opportunity, that in the education of teachers, if we could build in more creative practice, then it would be a more natural muscle to flex when you're in a classroom in front of students. I think we also have to think of teachers as creative people, not just as the teacher with all the knowledge. And so I think the more we can invest in teachers' time and resources to develop their own creative practices, the more that will be carried into the classroom. Yeah, I mean, assessment is not going anywhere. I think students will always be tested, and the real question is, what are we testing them on, and who gets to dictate what we're assessing? And the assessment for a creative practice is and should be very different than the assessment in a math class. And I guess for many of these big questions that we're asking, the answer for me is the ability to adapt and be flexible and allow multiple people to dictate that process. So I don't think that tests are a bad thing. I think that we have to be willing to change what we're testing and what we do with those results and how we use the results of testing to improve our own practice rather than just as a data point. So even though our class was to build a piece of architecture, I still gave lectures and we still did tests, and I would present precedents of architecture, and we would talk about the physics of why a building stands up or why a building falls down, and there's a lot of core content embedded in that. So I'm not anti-traditional models, I just think there has to be more than that, and actually the best learning is a mix of all those things. It's not a free-for-all, it's not all hands-on everything all day. It is rooted in something that it's scaffolded and it's structured, and I think the best learning has to be able to do both, because students learn in different ways, and the ability to be mentally flexible is a skill in and of itself. I think that as a child, I had two pretty incredible grandmothers. My mother is Chinese and my father is French, and both of my grandmothers were these fierce, independent women, and they were always making things. So my Chinese grandmother was always making dumplings, and she played like 6 musical instruments. My French grandmother, same thing, always needle pointing or making something usually textile based. And I guess this isn't a specific moment, but I think growing up around elders like that, from a very young age, it was obvious to me that making was synonymous with like care and compassion and learning. And so as I grew up, I began to equate learning with like what are we making and what are we making together, that it was like a form of both learning and also togetherness. So that's been sort of a formative mindset that I was lucky enough to grow up with, just being around my grandmothers. Yeah, it's been really fascinating, and I'm thinking about a lot of new things having been here at the conference. I think just the makeup of the attendees is so interesting, and it's really easy to sort of get stuck in your own context of I'm from the US and I teach this type of student, and being here has forced me to rethink my own assumptions that I've been so grounded in for so long, because you do have this incredible international audience who are all thinking about the same things but in such different ways and in the context of different cultures, and so that's been really inspiring to me.